Good evening and welcome to the October 1st, 2024 Finance Committee meeting. May we please take the roll?
Honorable Mayor Tack.
Here.
Chair Weber.
Here.
Alderman Novit.
Here.
Alderman Clemmons.
Here.
Alderman Notes.
Here.
Alderman Powers.
Here.
Alderman Gashgarian.
Here.
Alderman LaVert.
Here.
Alderman Walther.
Here.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Director Holub. Our first item of business tonight is consideration of the minutes from the Finance Committee meeting held July 15th. Does anyone have any comments? Seeing none, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Our next item of business tonight is reviewing the city's mission statement and fiscal year 2026 fiscal policy. And I will ask Director Holub to present this.
Thank you, Chair Weber. This officially begins and kicks off our fiscal year 26 budget process. Each October, we ask the Finance Committee to review and affirm the city's mission statement and also to review and approve the fiscal year 26 City Council fiscal policy. The fiscal policy sets forth the guidelines within which we develop the budget. And so we review that each year to see if there are any recommended changes or any questions before we begin work on the budget. This year we have no changes recommended to the fiscal policy compared to the one that was approved last year, but I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the council? Seeing none, I'd like to ask for a recommended action tonight to affirm the city's mission statement and approve the fiscal year 2026 fiscal policy. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, our topic is on the police and fire pension funding update. And again, Director Holub, would you please comment?
Of course. Thank you, Chair Weber. I know that you received a lot of information regarding our pension funding approach in your Finance Committee packet. The good news is we're not going to go through it all. I'm going to do a brief PowerPoint with some highlights and then answer any questions that you have. The first item included in the packet was a pension primer. We have made this document available on the city's website for quite a number of years. We hadn't updated it since 2018, so what you've received in your packet is a 2024 update. And it reflects just updated information regarding the 3 pension plans to which the city contributes. IMRF, the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, covers our non-public safety employees, and then we have a local police pension fund and a fire pension fund. Included in the pension primer is some information regarding benefits, participants in our plans, and governance of those 3 plans. I would just note that the benefits and employee contributions are set by state statute, so those cannot be changed by the city for any of the 3 plans. And the city employer contributions to all 3 plans are based on actuarially determined independent actuarial valuations done each year. IMRF runs on a calendar year, so it's an actuarial valuation as of December 31. And the city contracts with an independent actuary to do an actuarial valuation for police and fire pension plans as of April 30th each year. The pension primer also talks a little bit about Tier 1 and Tier 2. So the state statute created Tier 2 in these pension plans for anyone enrolled after January 1 of 2011. So we included some data in the pension primer for the police and fire pension plans to just show how our active participants in both the police and fire departments have transitioned from mostly Tier 1 to we have a good number of our active participants now that are Tier 2. I would note, however, that the city won't really see financial benefits of Tier 2 until long-term years from now because those Tier 2 participants are still active. They are not retiring yet or drawing pensions. And so we're not really going to see the benefit of that for a number of years. And I would also note in the last 2 years, we've seen some legislation introduced to alter Tier 2. So we're watching that very closely with the legislature to see if they did make any changes to Tier 2 that could significantly change the financial condition of the pension plans. The pension primer also includes some discussion of the investment authority, both historical investment authority and then also covering the 2020 consolidation. So as you know, legislation was passed requiring that local police and fire pension funds transfer their assets to a statewide investment fund that is not managed by the state. It is managed by an independent elected board of 9, both for the police and for the fire, and they are responsible for investing those assets and accounting for them with each individual local pension plan so that there is no commingling, no transfer of assets between local pension plans. They're required to maintain that accounting. And we have seen both a reduction in investment management expenses and an increase in the return on those investments, which was the intent of the legislation, particularly benefiting smaller pension plans that had very, very limited investment authority prior to the consolidation. We also provided some historical data on the investment returns and funded ratios of the plan, and then some current plan data. So that is really just reference material for you, updated as of October of 2024, and we'll place that updated pension primer on the city's website. I also wanted to just highlight today the long-term strategy that the city has had regarding its police and fire pension funding obligations. We started having conversations in September of 2016 regarding the state-mandated formula and approach to funding police and fire pension obligations in Illinois. And we recognized that it was simply not fiscally sustainable. They've been working with a 40-year amortization period, but the first amortization period expired in 2020, and then the state moved it to 2033. Now they've moved it to 2040, and they're talking about moving it to 2050 or 2055. Each time that moves out, it just increases the interest costs and the long-term issues associated with getting these plans funded. So we did a modeler. This chart shows in the blue line what the actuary in 2017 forecasted for the city's contributions to the police pension fund. This is often called the ramp. It is developed and designed in the modeling of state statute to simply increase your contributions up to the mandated deadline for funding, and then it would drop off. And so each time that period is moved out, it just increases interest costs. So the city started looking at an approach that would increase contributions up front, but bring that ramp down so that that unsustainable increase in contributions each year didn't occur. And so we increased contributions in the early years based on the modeling, and then in July of 2022, we did an analysis of what we had accomplished to date. So we were 5 years into the new strategy. We had made several changes. We reduced the payroll growth assumption from 5.5% to 2%, and we had reduced the investment return assumption from 7% to 6.5%. And so those increased contributions in the front years, but you can see from the orange line in 2022, those were the forecasted contributions to the police pension fund through 2040. What it showed was that advanced contributions of $3.2 million in the early years, those first 5 years, would generate $25.5 million in savings over the long term. Increasing the contributions in early years gives them more time to earn investment earnings, and so that brings down the city's projected contribution. So just a comparison to the recommended contribution as of 4/30/24, the recommended contributions next year for police and fire is $6.4 million, but using the statutory contribution, it would only be $4.85. So you can see that those additional contributions benefit the long-term health of those pension plans. We continue to use a city pension subcommittee, and each year that city pension subcommittee meets in the summer and reviews the draft actuarial valuations and receives a presentation with the actuary. We invite both the fire pension board and the police pension board to attend that meeting so they can hear the presentation and be part of that discussion, because we're all in this together and we're all trying to accomplish the same thing. At that meeting in July, the pension subcommittee reviewed the budget to actual results for fiscal year 24, where we had significant investment returns in fiscal year 24. They received a presentation from the actuary with a preliminary draft actuarial valuation and several options for actuarial assumption changes. They reviewed the status of the modeling, and as a result of the presentations, the pension subcommittee recommendation was to continue to use the same actuarial assumptions as we had used in fiscal year 23. And they recognized that we continue to be on course of accomplishing the funding requirements for both police and fire without significant increases in contributions. I know this is going to be really hard to see, but I'll just give you a flavor for what the pension subcommittee reviews each year with the actuary. And you really have three lines. Here you're looking at the police pension plan. The red line is the forecasted contributions using the statutory minimum. So you're still seeing that ramp up to the deadline of 2040 and then the drop off. The blue line that's going downwards is a 15-year open amortization. So what that assumes is that each year you take the unfunded liability and you divide it by 15. As you reduce the unfunded liability, but you divide by the same number, you start reducing the contribution because you don't have as large of an unfunded liability to amortize. The problem with open amortization is that you'll never reach 100%. And so the goal of the city has been to find a blend between these two approaches that will minimize the ramp and increase contributions, but reach 100% funded status eventually. So the dark gray line is the forecasted contributions based on the city's current pension funding policy, which is 100% funded by 2040. And so you can see there's a slight increase, and then there's still a significant drop-off. So what the pension subcommittee is looking to do is find the sweet spot, the level of contributions over time that will meet the statutory requirement of 90% funded by 2040, but not see a significant drop-off of contributions. That's the dotted line. So the actuary is asked each year to present this to the pension subcommittee and show where we stand on the dotted line to see whether or not we're still meeting our goals. And so here with the dotted line, you can see effectively fairly flat contributions until 2040, and then a much smaller drop-off. And the goal of the pension subcommittee is to make sure that there's intergenerational equity, that taxpayers now are not paying a disproportionate share of the obligations. And so we see a smaller drop-off and then continued contributions going forward. The next slide is just the same for the fire. You see smaller difference because the fire pension plan is higher funded. So you don't see quite the same steep lines that you see with the police pension fund. So each year they review that. They could see that they were still on track. And so we're analyzing that each year to just make sure that we're on course. So we have those actuarial valuation recommendations included in the property tax levy that you'll discuss for the first time tonight, but 5 times over the course of the next few months. But on pension funding, happy to answer any questions.
Alderman Kashgarian?
Yeah, through the chair, thank you. Elizabeth, first off, I want to point out to the public, and I'm sure many of you have heard this before, but it was Director Holub that first proposed that 15-year open-ended amortization, which has put us on a really strong footing. But I kind of want to pivot back to where we were in the beginning of the discussion. My real concerns about what the state had done in terms of establishing Tier 1 and Tier 2 back in 2011. And I've heard the same rumblings in terms of Politicians will buy votes any way they possibly can, and looking at modifying Tier 2 to really mirror Tier 1, which is a real concern to me, because as we finally found ourselves on solid footing, have we done any internal actuarial projections based on the room? And I know you should never act on rumors, but I'm a firm believer in planning ahead. And if there is some type of a hybrid there, do we have any sense as to what our increased burden would be, number one? And then number two, and I'm glad that Kurt is here, so Kurt Asmuth is with Ansel and Glink, which is our city attorney. As we learned, or as the state learned, any modification to a pension was deemed illegal by the state of Illinois Supreme Court. Is the shoe now on the other foot, and we've entered into an agreement with those public pensions, and they're trying to increase the burden? Do we have stature within the judicial system to object to that and possibly try and approach this in a legal manner? And if that increased burden is, placed on us as a municipality, which is clearly what the state is considering, do we have, and I'm not a lawyer, so for the lawyers out there, forgive me, but do we have position to object legally and try and stop that from happening?
So, Alderman Gushker, let me just make sure I understand. So, the pension protection clause, which means that, says you can't diminish or impair somebody's pension after they've already received it. So, Tier 2 is going forward. You can't go backwards and change somebody's pension after they have those vested rights. So, you're saying, does the city have standing to enforce that?
No, my
Pension,
question
is that
is
the
if
question?
the state attempts to take those Tier 2 liabilities, forgive me for using that term, but
Yeah.
that's what they are to our budget, do we have the ability to offer up any type of legal argument that, this agreement has been made, and now you're trying to increase the burden on us?
I think there might be an argument, it might be a tough one, just because the state's obviously going to have the ability to structure that tier on their own. They're the ones that are the ones deciding how that tier works. Whether or not that would be constitutional, I think we would have an argument there if we think it somehow is violating a constitutional protection that the legislature can't go beyond. But unfortunately, since the legislature gets to create that second tier, we're going to have a hard time fighting it directly unless we can find a way to say that it violates the pension protection clause, which I don't know if trying to shift the obligations would directly violate that constitutional section. Maybe I'm misunderstanding your question.
No,
Yeah.
you're understanding my question very clearly. Thank you. And then I guess pivoting back to Director Holub.
Yeah,
Have
and
we
I would
done
say
any-
we haven't done any specific cost projections for a couple of reasons. There's a lot of variables out there. So there's a Tier 1 rollback. There's a Tier 2 rollback to move it right to Tier 1 as one possibility. Second, and more often you hear Tier 2 violating the safe harbor rules associated with Social Security because they are not eligible for Social Security benefits and do not pay into Social Security. But the Illinois Municipal League did an independent study that showed that Tier 2 doesn't violate the safe harbor rules. But on that premise, there might be some modifications to Tier 2, but not a complete move to Tier 1. There's also discussion out there about a drop program that would allow people to remain employed but suspend their defined benefit pension and begin to move to a defined contribution plan to allow them to remain employed in their department beyond, kind of establishing their retirement
Anybody
amount.
ever leave a defined benefit and
Yeah, and then you have the amortization period.
Yeah.
So I think as we see specific proposals put out there, I'm confident our actuary could run those numbers for us upon our
because that could
request.
have significant impacts on what we budget in out of our operational budget, correct? That's going to very much impact the services that we are able to provide for our residents. So it's worth noting. And then for those of you here who are here for a while, it's something that's worth
And I may just
attention
add
to.
to that too. The mayor and I are both pretty actively involved with the various councils of government that we participate in, the Northwest Municipal Conference, the Lake County Municipal League, and then of course there's statewide organizations like the Illinois Municipal League, all of whom are universally mobilized around this issue and have worked, I think, to date pretty effectively in explaining how to our legislators how catastrophic a rollback of Tier 2 would be for municipal budgets. So not to say that that has always prevailed in conversations in Springfield, but there is a lot of pressure from municipal organizations and councils of government to fight any potential changes moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you for the thoughtful conversation. Does anyone else have any comments? Seeing none, I just want to echo Alderman Goshgarian and say thank you to Director Holub and her finance team for all of their work in keeping our city in great shape and well use of our taxpayer dollars with seeing that savings. That was an informational item, so we'll move on now to our 2024 property tax levy estimate. And there's quite a lengthy description there on our agenda. I'll just read the first part. The Truth in Taxation statute requires that the corporate authorities of each taxing district estimate the amount of its proposed aggregate tax levy not less than 20 days prior to the adoption of the tax levy ordinance. This estimate is used to determine whether a notice in public hearing is required. Consistent with the process utilized the past few years, it's recommended that the city formalize its tax levy estimate at the November 4th City Council meeting, at which time a public hearing date may be established if needed. And the proposed tax levy process would be as follows. November 4th would be our 2024 non-binding, thank you, Elizabeth, tax levy estimate and establish tax levy public hearing date if required. November 12th, discussion of the tax levy estimate. That's at our Finance Committee budget workshop. November 18th would be the 2024 tax levy ordinance first reading. November 21st, public notice of public hearing in the Lake Forester if required, and December 2nd, public hearing if required, tax levy ordinance second reading and final approval. And Elizabeth, I'll have you take it away from there.
Certainly, thank you. So this does begin a process whereby over the next couple of months, you will discuss the property tax levy several times. We do typically have a very detailed discussion of the tax levy and the individual components at the budget workshop in November. That gives us a good opportunity to go through the different factors, the different components of the tax levy. But that does come after the mandated truth in taxation non-binding estimate that would be slated on your November 4th City Council meeting. So we've done some preliminary work on the tax levy and did include in your packet an initial estimate of $41,445,598. That represents an increase of 4.56% over the prior year, which would not technically trigger truth in taxation because it's not more than 5%. But I would note that it does include the third and final phase of the Deer Path Park bonds coming onto the tax levy. We did that over 3 years. And does include initially an additional $500,000 to begin phase-in of debt for the police facility improvements. And so we would discuss those in detail at the budget workshop in November. It does include the police and fire pension levies as outlined in the independent actuarial valuations. And then it does include the 3.4% PTEL increase on library and parks and recreation levy line items. That's their operating levy. So we traditionally apply the tax cap each year to that line item. And then a 2% increase to the general fund operating levy. So with that, we would just be looking for the Finance Committee to concur with the preliminary and non-binding estimate for the tax levy for the November 4th City Council meeting.
Any questions for Director Holub? Seeing none, our recommended action tonight is to recommend a non-binding 2024 tax levy estimate to be presented at our November 4th, 2024 City Council meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, we'll carry on, motion carries. Thank you. Other business for tonight, Elizabeth, do you want to comment on these, or would you like me to?
No presentations are planned. This is just some additional information. The flash report is available on the website. Quarterly investment report is included in your packet. Per state statute, per city code, we have the fee reductions or waivers granted in excess of $1,000, which is a quarterly item reported to you. And then the fiscal year 24 treasurer's report is included on your city council agenda this evening, and Jimmy Scott from the finance department will be presenting that.
Wonderful. Any additional comments from the council? This is an opportunity for the public to address the finance committee. Do we have anyone who'd like to come up to the stand? Seeing none. Thank you very much. I'll go ahead and ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. We'll take a
5-minute break.
5-minute break, and we'll be back to begin our meeting. Thank you.
Nice job.